Hi, in this video I'll be showing you how to create something like this. It's a full 3D scene rendered directly in a web browser. This window here is just a Google Chrome with no special plugins or dependencies installed. I've modeled a simple scene containing just a few of these TV screens and a spotlight that's moving from one side to the other to demonstrate that this indeed can be animated and all of these shadows are moving appropriately, as you would expect from something that's rendered dynamically. And also I attached a video feed from my Raspberry Pi that's sitting right here in front of me. So this is Raspberry Pi 0 connected via the CSI interface to a camera module here. The rest of this contraption can be ignored. It's part of my other project that I've been working on. And as you can see, the latency is not very bad actually, considering that the camera is not even directly connected to my computer, but the data stream goes through a wireless router I have. Okay, back to computer. So the rendering technology really boils down to plain HTML canvas and a lot of JavaScript. But don't worry, for modeling we're gonna be using Blender, which is very popular 3D modeling and rendering tool, and I'm pretty sure you're already familiar with that. And then we're gonna use Blend4Web framework to convert our Blender project to the necessary HTML and JavaScript files. So there will be only very little scripting involved. The best part is that both of these softwares, Blender and Blend4Web, are free and open source. All the download links to the necessary software and all the resources mentioned in this video, as well as the Raspberry Pi setup I used, will be in the video description below. Alright, so go ahead and open your web browser and go to blend4web.com. Once loaded, we're gonna go to downloads, and here you can see the version of the Blend4Web framework. So just click the download button. You can just say, thanks, just let me download the product. Also, Blend4Web is compatible with the older version of Blender, the 2.79. Unfortunately, their download link doesn't work and the file size is 0. So we're gonna go to blender.org, the official website for Blender. Click the download section and previous versions. We want a stable release, and here you can choose the package that suits your operating system. For 64-bit Windows, it's gonna be this one. My desktop is kind of messy, so please ignore all that crap on both sides. This is the section we will focus on. I highlighted the important part, so once we have both files downloaded, we can extract them here. After it's finished, we can open the Blender folder and the Blender exe file. We need to go to File, User Preferences, and then under the File tab there's a Scripts field, and we want to select the Blend4Web folder we extracted a moment ago, Blend4Web_CE. And then click the Save User Settings button. Now we restart Blender and go to File and User Preferences again, and under Add-ons you should see a Blend4Web section here, or you can just type Blend4Web in the search bar here. Once you click it, it's gonna freeze for a few seconds because it's importing the Blend4Web add-on, and after it's checked, it means it's done. And now under the rendering engines here, you should see a Blend4Web engine. Every time you use Blender with the intention of using Blend4Web, make sure you have the this engine selected, because of course there are some simplifications and some options are different compared to the original Blender and Cycles render. Now we can go to the render page with the little camera icon, and as you can see it says development server is running. That's because the Blend4Web SDK is hosted on a server locally, and after clicking the project manager button, it will open a web browser for us with some sample projects that already come with the framework pre-installed, and they pretty much demonstrate everything you can do from like user input, audio, creating and changing textures and stuff like that. So I highly recommend checking some of these out. For example, when you click this one, it will compile for a while. It should be loaded in a few seconds. And now we have a first-person shooter in our web browser. You can shoot, aim, jump. There's some physics implemented, and all of these leaves are moving. So that's pretty neat. Right. Now we can create our own project here. Gonna name it, for example, Cam project. I already created one, and just ignore all of this stuff and hit create project. Project created. Great. Back to projects. And now you can see we have our project here. This also created a new Blender project for us, so we want to head back to Blender, hit File and Open, and here in the Blend4Web_CE/projects we should see our cam_project, and in the Blender folder there's a .blend file, which is a project in Blender. After opening, there's some sample cube and light, and all of this needs to be replaced with our models and our scene. And this video is not about showing you how to use Blender for modeling, because I'm not very good at it, and also there's a large amount of great resources on YouTube already, so I suggest checking these out instead. Okay, so this is my result so far. I have 2 planes for floor and a wall, 1 camera, a spotlight, and a very simple model of a TV screen. Now we need to apply some materials to the TV screen, so select it by right-clicking it and go to material page, click new material, and we're gonna name this one TV frame, and it's just gonna be pitch black for the frame, and we're gonna need 1 more material for the screen, so it's gonna be TV screen. And I downloaded a sample image of a TV noise, so let's apply that now in the texture page here. Scroll up and hit new, and all the way at the bottom there's open button, and now we need to locate the image. I put it in the assets directory here, tvnoise.png. It's not showing right now because we need to specify which face will contain which material, because we have more materials. So go to edit mode and right click the face, the front face of the TV screen, select the TV screen material and hit assign. Now we can go to the texture viewport and we can see that it looks like a TV. One thing I forgot to mention, in the texture section you should name your texture. This will be very important later on, so remember the name of the texture. I will name it TV_screen_TX. The next step is to make more TVs. I wouldn't recommend doing it by the copy-paste method because that's gonna copy the material into a new one. So now the TV frame, as you can see, is a different material. So when I edit the color here, it will affect only one of the objects. So we're instead gonna hit Shift and D for duplicate. And as you can see, the material is get duplicated as well. So now when I edit the color, oops, it will affect both models. If you want to have shadows in your scene, you need to select your light source, go to the light page here and select the shadow checkbox. Then select all your shadow casting objects, and in the object page all the way at the bottom there's a shadow section, and you need to select the cast shadow checkbox. And lastly, all the shadow receiving objects should have the receive shadows checkbox checked. In the render page there's another section about shadows, and you can play around with these numbers. I recommend using soft shadows because it looks really nice in the final render. Okay, this is what I ended up with. I have a few of these screens placed randomly, and I also added another light source. It's a sun light source. It means it affects all the objects in the scene, and it doesn't matter where it's located. The only things that matter are the rotation and the properties in the light page here. Also, I added some more walls, but I'm gonna hide them for now so we can see everything. So the last thing we need to do is to animate the spotlight to move from one side of the room to the other. So let's place it on one side and go to frame 1 of your animation on your timeline here. And then we want to animate its location because that's what changes when we move the light. So by the way, this panel can be invoked by hitting N or this plus icon here. And now we can create a keyframe by hitting I, and your mouse, your cursor should be over the location section. So we have created a keyframe, that's the yellow line here on the timeline. Now go to frame 125, which is in the middle of our animation. It's the half of 250. And move the light to the other side of the room. And again, hover over the location section and hit I to create another keyframe. And now we want, as you can see, it's animated, but we want the light to go back to its original position. To do that precisely, we can go to the animation view and go to the frame 250. And now we can, by hitting A, unselect everything, and by C, dragging over these keyframes, select just the first ones, the original position, and by Ctrl C and Ctrl V we can copy them to the frame 150. And now when we go back to default view, it should be animated properly. And one last thing I forgot to mention, for the Blend4Web to use the animation we just created, we need to select the spotlight, go to the object page, and under the animation section, check the Apply Default Animation checkbox. The behavior should be a loop in our case, so the animation plays over and over again. Now, once you're done, or actually anytime during the modeling process, if you're wondering how your scene will look like in the final result, you can click the Fast Preview button, which will open a web browser and compile and load the scene. And after a few seconds, this is what we can see, which is very similar to the final result. When you're done and you're happy with your results, you can go back to Blender and save your project, and also export your project as Blend4Web JSON file. You should be exporting it to the assets directory in your project folder. So go ahead and click the B4W Export JSON button. And after that, you can go back to the project manager, locate your project, and hit the Build Project link. After it's done, it should say project building completed. If you're not interested in the rest of this video, where I'll be showing you how to connect the video feed from the Raspberry Pi to the screens we just modeled, you're done at this point, and you can just go to your project directory and copy all of those files to your server, or basically anywhere where you're able to serve them to the connected clients. In the build folder, when I attempt to open this HTML file in Chrome locally, it's not going to work because of Google's cross-origin policies. But when I open it in Microsoft Edge, it should work just fine even locally, and here you can see your result. This is how it's going to look on your server as well. So now we need to create a very simple HTTP server for the Raspberry Pi. That's going to be this web server.py script written in Python. And I will very briefly go over this and explain it a little bit. So first we need to import some libraries. Then here there's the port the server will be running on. There's some camera configuration. This class handles the capturing of the camera frame, and it can notify us when the frame is ready. Now we need to create a custom HTTP GET handler, which will inherit from this class right here. And we need to override the doGet function, because later on we will ask from JavaScript for a file called text.jpg, and we need to implement a proper response for that. So first we want to wait until a new frame is ready, and after that we can respond with the success response code, which is 200 in HTTP. Then we will send a header and say that the content type following the headers will be JPEG image. We will end the headers and now send the frame itself, which will be encoded in the base 64 coding. This down here is just the server and camera initialization and running. Now we need to create the JavaScript code that will actually change the texture on the TV screen. So we need to locate the project in Blend4Web. So project cam_project, and there should be this cam_project.js JavaScript file. So let's open it up. And there should be a bunch of code already written for us. First, we need to specify what modules we're going to use. So Blend4Web uses modules. You can use different modules to achieve different things. There are quite a lot of them. So for example, if you want to use mouse as a user input, you should include this mouse module. We're only gonna work with textures though, so we need this texture module, and here you can see all the methods you can use. So let's include the textures module and store it in m_textures variable. So then we can scroll down a little bit, and here is the section where we can write our own code to do stuff in the scene. So I'm gonna paste the code we need in here. That's all we need. So first we're gonna create a shortcut for the textures module, so we can work with that. We want to find our TV object in the scene, which is done like this with this method, and we need to pass the name of the object as a string. So now we have the TV object in this variable. Then we want to create a new image and attach a callback to it, which will be called every time the image is loaded. Inside that callback, we want to replace the TV screen texture with the image from the camera. So to do that, we can use the replace image method from the textures module, and pass the TV object reference to it and the name of the texture as well as the new image. At the end, we will call the AJAX function we defined down here to retrieve a new frame from the camera. In this AJAX function, we will be sending the HTTP GET requests asynchronously. And on response, we want to set the image source as the response, or the data we receive, which will be a JPEG image encoded in the base 64 coding. Down here we will create the GET request asking for text.jpg file and send the request. And finally, we need to call that AJAX function once to retrieve the initial image, the first one, and then it will call itself again and again here every time the new image is received. So after this, everything should be ready, and we just need to recompile the project. So go back to the project manager and hit build project. So after that's completed, everything should be ready, and now we just need to transfer everything to the Raspberry Pi. So let's locate the project once again, and all of these files should be copied to the Raspberry Pi as well as the web server we created earlier. To do that, I recommend using WinSCP, which can use the SFTP protocol, which runs over the SSH protocol. So let's connect to the Raspberry Pi. And let's go to home and Pi, for example. It doesn't really matter. And just paste the folder, the chem project folder there. You can drag and drop it. Now let's open the chem project, and let's copy the web server as well in there. So everything should be ready by now, and we can finally test it out. To connect to my Raspberry Pi, I will use the PuTTY SSH client and connect to the IP address of the Raspberry. And then I'm gonna log in And now we need to go to the home and PuTTY directory, and then to the CAM project folder. And now we want to grant the execution permissions to our web server by this command. And now we should be able to run it as a normal script. It's serving at port 8000. So let's open a web browser and type in the Raspberry's IP address, then a semicolon, and the port you specified. Here we can see the project folder, so let's navigate to build directory and open the cam_project.html file. Now it should load, and as you can see, it's working just fine. So I hope you got to this point without any problems, and if you encountered any issues or anything missing in this video, please let me know in the video description below on YouTube. And also let me know if you would like to see more tutorials like this, because I found this Blend4Web framework pretty cool.